I have to raise this story because it was something that actually stopped me in my tracks. If you follow me on Twitter, you'll know why. If you don't follow me on Twitter, you're missing out, quite frankly. What can I say? But anyway, there was this story that caught my eye, and it was West Yorkshire Police. You remember those people because that was the force that was involved in that whole 14-year-old and a Quran. But don't get me started on that one. Anyway, they've released a statement saying that a woman had been jailed for 9 years for false imprisonment, assault and robbery against their partner. That woman was a 56-year-old biological male who'd been previously convicted of rape. Now, can I get a picture up of this individual? If I can, I would very much like to share it with you. If you're not if you're listening rather than watching, so you don't know what I'm talking about, that is a man. Full stop. Michael, why do you think, or do you think it matters? I don't want to project onto you because you might disagree with me. Do you think it matters when you have a situation that is a man on the screen? Not only is it a man, it's a man that's raped somebody and has now done horrendous things. And to me, it matters that a law enforcement body is referring to that man as woman, she, her. Does it matter to you?
Well, I mean, I think there's a number of things to say about this. I mean, we don't know about this person's life. Now, we live in a society where trans people exist, right? So just in the way that sort of in the 1960s or before that, people didn't think that gay people existed or were natural, and now we're very comfortable with the fact that there are lots of gay people around. I think we're in a similar stage when it comes to trans people. Now, we as a society are having a conversation, what makes someone a woman? You know, if someone's cis, if someone was born biologically a woman, it's very obvious what makes someone a woman. If someone is trans, and I do think, you know, trans people exist, we have to take them seriously. What makes someone a woman? Now, there's an argument, it's self-ID, so it's saying you're a woman makes you a woman. There's another argument that you need a diagnosis of gender dysphoria from your doctor. And I think one tool we definitely shouldn't use for assessing whether someone is a woman is just looking at them, right? Because if you are a trans woman, passing, I think, is something which causes... So passing, can you be perceived as the gender that you now identify as? I think that causes a lot of trauma in and of itself. Obviously, the younger you transition, the easier it is for you to pass as the other gender. The more money you have, the easier it is to pass as the other gender because you can get surgery, etc. So I do think there's a danger there. And also, just to take a step back, I think it probably is a shame that we're having this conversation, which I think is a serious one and needs to be had, but in the context of a rapist, right? Now, obviously, I think quite rightly, there's lots of policy debates and discussions going on at the moment about trans rights because, you know, there are policies that people want to change. And I think there are genuine conflicts when it comes to, say, sports or prisons. But I do think it's a problem if the media is constantly highlighting particular criminals in a particular minority group. And I think we recognised that when it came to gay people, when there was a moral panic about gay pedos in the 1980s. I think we recognised that about ethnic minorities, if sort of you have newspapers that were constantly just any time there was someone of an ethnic minority who committed a crime saying this person of this ethnic minority has committed a crime. And I think it's clear how that can create a pretty hateful environment. Now, this is not to say that I think all of your concerns about who is and who isn't a woman are completely bigoted or unjustified. I'm just saying I think this isn't necessarily the best way to have this discussion in the context of this person who's committed such awful crimes.
I have got lots I want to say back to you, but before I do, Toby Young, your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that the reason this has become such a heated discussion is because when you refer to a trans woman as him or he, they hear it as hate speech. They hear it as transphobia, as a denial of their existence, as an attempt to erase them, an act of real, brutal hostility. But to people who believe that sex is binary and immutable, for them it's just an expression of what they believe. They can believe that for a variety of reasons, because they're a Muslim or because they're an Orthodox Christian or because they've studied biology, for whatever reason, because they're defenders of sex-based women's rights. And I think we have to get away from this idea that if you so-called misgender or dead name a trans woman or a trans man, that's somehow disrespectful, that's somehow an expression of irrational hatred for trans people. It's not. You can still believe that trans people should have rights and those rights should be respected without necessarily going along with this notion that they can change sex because they identify as a different sex to their biological sex. I mean, I think I wouldn't want to describe that person as a woman. I wouldn't want to refer to him as she or her. It just seems to me to be patently absurd. But to see the authorities siding with the trans rights activists, even though the majority of people do think that sex is binary and immutable, whether it's the BBC, the police. I recently appeared as a defence witness, an expert defence witness, or submitted evidence anyway, in a case in which an evangelical street preacher had been prosecuted, charged with a public order offence for supposedly misgendering a trans woman who was heckling him in Leeds city centre. And he was convicted. Eventually that conviction was overturned on appeal. But we can't have the authorities insisting, compelling us to essentially affirm what is a pretty extreme ideological position, any more than we can have the authorities say, whenever you use the word the Prophet Muhammad, you have to follow that with peace be upon him. You know, if we're going to live together, we can't compel people who aren't members of our community, who aren't members of our tribe, to respect our taboos, our sacred values, our blasphemy rules. We have to be a little bit more liberal, a little bit more live and let live than that.
Yeah, see, I think this is a crucially important conversation to have. Because you've got a law enforcement body. So first and foremost, just to be clear, I reject the notion of self-identification. I don't, if that's what you want to do with yourself, about your own gender, you know, whatever. When it comes to the eyes of the law, the laws of the land, you know, to me, your self-identification is for the birds, really. Facts matter. And when I have a police force telling me, oh, this woman has done this and this woman has done that, it's not true. It's not true. So if this man self-identified as innocent, what? Do the police take that as well? Or suddenly then do facts matter because he's not innocent after all? Where's the cut-off point? Where's the line?
Well, this is where I think facts do matter, right? But I do think that there's a lot of evidence that just in the same way that I was born gay, right, some people are born trans. And so therefore it's not just, oh, this is a man who randomly decided to become a woman or who's pretending to be a woman. I think there is a biological reality to the fact that trans people exist, right? And I think probably in a couple of decades or so, that will be socially accepted in the same way that people now accept that gay people exist. People used to think that was unnatural, that sort of reality was men are supposed to get with women. Women are supposed to get with men. Now we actually understand, oh, life's a bit more complicated than that. And I think we probably will get to somewhere like that when it comes to gender.
Welcome back, everybody. We've just been talking about the subject that caught my eye, which was West Yorkshire Police describing this guy, basically, he's done awful crimes as a woman, and why I'm concerned and why I think it's problematic. I do just want to pick you up on something that you said before we went to the break. You described me as a cis woman, and I really reject that notion that all of a sudden, to incorporate this group of people, I now have to have this kind of label attached to me. I reject that notion.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose, why?
Because I'm a woman.
Yeah.
I'm a woman, and what happens, and I must be honest, it's mainly men that trot out this sentence, trans women are women, and they say it really fast, and then you've got to move on. And if you dare bat an eyelid and go, hang on a minute, then you are, you know, vilified, you're called all kinds of names. But I'm a woman. Womanhood is not a gown that you then shove on when you wake up in the morning and go, da-da, today I'm a woman, and then you take off your gown and then you're perhaps whatever. It's not like that. Being a woman is a physical reality. It gives me a benefit and a strength and an advantage that, no offence to you two, you won't have as men. It gives me, providing all my bits work properly, an ability to have the greatest gift on earth, which is to grow my own child, to feed my own child. And it is a beautiful, wonderful gift. And some guy declaring, today I'm in trans mode, doesn't actually fill me with great confidence, and it certainly doesn't make me feel that what I need to do is have this label attached to me in order to accommodate said guy.
Yeah, I mean, I suppose I don't want to talk to your feelings about any particular word. I mean, I can imagine also having a similar... I don't want to be a straight man, I'm just a man, right? It's when we get a more complicated idea about identity, often you have to add a word to distinguish people from other people. But in terms of your argument about sort of being a woman is sort of a physical reality and it matters, it's not just an identity, it's not just a decision, I 100% agree with you. I 100% agree with you on that. I don't think saying I'm a gay man makes me a gay man. I think it's how I live, my practice, right? And I think the same really is now emerging to be the case when it comes to gender. I think there are people who were born with penises who genuinely don't really fit the body they were born in, right? And I have trans friends, you know, they knew this from such a young age, in the same way that I knew I was gay from such a young age. I really don't think it is just on a whim, people saying, oh, by the way, I'm trans. And if I really believed that this was just people on a whim saying, oh, by the way, I'm trans, then probably I wouldn't believe them either.
What does it mean when we're saying, I feel like I am a woman and therefore I am? Like, I reject the notion of, like you say earlier on, you said, oh, you know, if you self-ID as a woman, you can self-ID as a plant pot and water yourself 10 times a day if you want. I don't really care. But what we're talking about now is a fundamental attempt to restructure society in the way that we know it, in a way that has perhaps kept a lot of ladies, girls, women safe over many years. There's an erosion of that. And a lot of it is based on fantasy and not fact.
Well, so, I mean, in terms of self-ID, I'm quite open-minded about self-ID. I think this is sort of a policy question. I don't think saying you're a woman makes you a woman, just as I don't think saying I'm gay makes me gay. But to be honest, I think probably the best way to find out if I'm gay is to ask me, not to put a CCTV camera in my bedroom. And I think you can look at transgender people in a similar way.
Why are you conflating sexuality with a biological reality? This is the bit that I find peculiar, and it's almost to me as an attempt to try and paint someone as bigoted. Oh, there was loads of abuse towards gay people in whatever decade, and now this is the same thing. To me, they're completely different things. You've got your sexuality, you've got your gender, and then you've got your biological sex, which in my mind, and OK, I accept there's different opinions, I'm not necessarily right and everyone else is wrong, but this is my view. To me, that it's just binary. It's indisputable science, reality. What am I missing?
I think that there's, you often hear this parallel between the gay rights movement and the trans rights movement, but I think they are very different. I mean, for one thing, there are many more gay people in our society than there are trans people. The recent census found that trans people were no more than 0.5% of the entire population. It's also, there's a requirement that we upend everything. We admit trans women into women's changing rooms. We allow them to compete against biological women in women's sports, including rugby and ultimate fighting. You know, the demands are much more ambitious and much more aggressive than the demands of the gay rights movement. But here's a critical difference. The gay rights movement went about winning those rights in a really effective way. They made the case in the public square. They argued. They took on bigots intellectually on platforms. They debated with them. The attitude of the trans rights activists is no debate. If you don't agree with every jot and tittle of my ideology, then you're a TERF, you're a bigot, you're a transphobe. I don't want to talk to you. I'm not going to share a platform with you. That doesn't work. If you want to secure better representation, if you want trans rights to be more widely respected, if you want trans people to be able to live a full life in which they can fully express themselves and be themselves, the trans rights movement is going about it in exactly the wrong way. Look at what happened in New Zealand at the weekend with the mobbing of Kelly J. Keane. It happened at Hyde Park Corner on Sunday. The trans rights activists and their allies are so aggressive, so belligerent, so intransigent, demanding that everyone respect their gender pronouns. It's just not the way to go about achieving their objective of making society a friendlier place for them. Why don't they take a leaf out of the gay rights movement and behave more like that?
Well, you know what? This is, again, one of those issues that we're not going to conclude in just a few minutes on this programme. This conversation will rumble on and on.